What is the ultimate betrayal? Imagine your husband brings his mistress into your home. Now, imagine you're carrying his child, and then he watches as she raises her hand and strikes you. But what if, in that shattering moment of humiliation, you weren't a victim? What if you were an evidence collector? This isn't just the story of a broken heart. It's the story of a perfectly executed revenge, captured one secret recording at a time. In the heart of Arlington County, Virginia, lies an exclusive community known as Hillside Heights. Tall gates stand guard at the entrance, and the roads inside curve around manicured gardens and sprawling lawns. Multi-million-dollar mansions tower over green slopes, each property designed to outdo the next. The Greenwood Mansion, a magnificent Georgian-style estate, is arguably the gem of Hillside Heights. Built from imported brick and accentuated by grand white pillars, the house glistened under the bright morning sun, a testament to the prosperity and secrets of the family within. Inside this grand residence lived Elijah Greenwood, a wealthy entrepreneur in his mid-30s whose meteoric rise in the tech industry had turned him from a modest computer geek into a local celebrity. Dark-haired, tall, and charismatic, Elijah was the kind of man who seemed able to charm his way into any deal, any partnership, and any heart. Alongside him was his wife, Olivia Greenwood, radiant at 30, known for her kind spirit and generosity, who had been thrilled to discover she was carrying their first child. For years, they were considered the golden couple, until subtle cracks in their facade began to reveal a very different truth. It started innocently enough, slight tensions over Elijah's late nights at the office, phone calls he left the room to take, hush-hush business trips that seemed oddly timed. At first, Olivia chided herself for being paranoid. Marriage to a mogul was always bound to be stressful, and pregnancy could heighten anxieties, making a woman imagine problems that didn't exist. Little did she know, she wasn't imagining the changes in her husband at all. One crisp morning, when Olivia was nearly 5 months pregnant, the staff busily rearranged fresh flowers in the sitting room. Elijah paced in the foyer, phone glued to his ear, his expression stormy. Olivia stepped down the winding staircase, a hand on her growing belly, feeling a pang of concern that something else was amiss. Over the past few weeks, she had overheard hushed conversations that ended abruptly whenever she drew near. Though she yearned for honesty, she often felt like a mere accessory in Elijah's pristine world, shown off for galas and parties, but left in the dark about his real feelings. On this day, the staff politely shuffled out, leaving them alone in a silent standoff. Olivia cleared her throat and ventured a question. "Elijah, is everything okay? You seem on edge lately." He brushed off her concern with a dismissive shrug. "It's just business, Liv," he said, not meeting her eyes. "A deal fell through at the last minute. I need to fix it." His tight-lipped response was a pattern she'd grown used to, and she cradled her belly, wishing for more from him, worried for the child growing inside her. But she kept her lips sealed. She had learned that pressing Elijah only intensified the distance between them. Nothing that morning, however, could prepare her for the chaos that was coming soon. The name Rebecca Stone would twist itself into every corner of Olivia's existence, becoming the very definition of heartbreak, humiliation, and ultimately, her path to a devastating revenge no one in Hillside Heights would soon forget. Just 3 weeks later, Elijah informed Olivia about a cocktail charity event at the Hillside Country Club. Known for hosting philanthropic galas, the country club was a gathering place for the rich and famous, and also the perfect environment for cunning social maneuvering. Olivia, still quietly worried about her husband's erratic moods, decided to go, if only to maintain appearances. She donned a flowing teal gown that showcased her pregnant figure, her hair in a sleek chignon, determined to uphold the Greenwood name. Once there, under the glimmer of chandeliers and amidst the hum of wealthy patrons sharing polite conversation, Olivia felt a wave of relief to be around familiar faces, even though her husband kept drifting away to talk with men she barely knew. Sipping a non-alcoholic sparkling drink, she was about to seek Elijah out when a friend, Madison Brooks, nudged her. "Liv, do you know that woman talking to Elijah?" Madison gestured subtly with her champagne flute across the room. Olivia followed the direction of Madison's gaze and spotted a tall brunette, slender and statuesque in a red sequin dress that left little to the imagination. She had one hand on Elijah's shoulder and leaned in a bit too close for comfort as they spoke. Something about her posture and the way Elijah occasionally pressed his lips together made a chill run through Olivia's spine. "No." Olivia's voice trailed off. "I haven't seen her before." Madison's eyes narrowed. "Her name is Rebecca Stone, I think. A new face in our circle. Rumor is she's been climbing up the social ladder with surprising speed, and not always by the most respectable means." Olivia swallowed hard, painting on a polite smile. She wanted to trust her husband, to dismiss the rumors as typical high society gossip, but anxiety gnawed at her. Instead of confronting Elijah at the event, she simply observed from a distance, noticing the unspoken intensity of their conversation. Eventually, Elijah rejoined her, gave her a light kiss on the cheek, and murmured, "I need to finalize a deal. I'll be back soon." He slipped away again, leaving Olivia with more questions than answers. Over the next few days, little clues surfaced. An unfamiliar perfume clinging to Elijah's jacket, a suspicious message from RS on his phone, quickly deleted. Olivia caught glimpses of guilt in his eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. In her more desperate moments, she considered ignoring it all for the sake of peace. But the child growing inside her deserved better. The final straw occurred one evening when Elijah took a phone call on the back patio. The warm glow from the patio lights reflected on the glass doors, enabling Olivia to see his reflection. His expression lit up with an affection she hadn't seen in months, and he whispered in an intimate tone, "I miss you too. Soon, I promise. I'll figure out a way." Olivia's heart pounded in her chest, tears pricking her eyes. Clearly, he wasn't talking to a business partner. Gently placing her hand over her belly, she felt her unborn child stir, as though it too sensed the looming betrayal. It was then that she resolved something. She needed proof. Proof that she wasn't losing her mind, proof that her suspicions were valid, and that Elijah's denials were lies. A week later, a discreet phone call connected Olivia to Gary Thompson, a private investigator recommended by a trusted friend. Gary was middle-aged, balding, with keen eyes that missed nothing. It took only one conversation for Olivia to confide her suspicions about her husband's potential infidelity. She explained the delicate nature of her pregnancy and her hesitation to cause a public scandal. Gary listened quietly, taking notes. "I'll keep this discreet, Mrs. Greenwood," he promised, "and gather whatever evidence I can. If he's cheating, you'll know soon enough." Olivia felt a pang of guilt. She once believed marriage meant unconditional trust and loyalty, not private investigators and hidden cameras. But her future, and her child's, depended on uncovering the truth. It took less than 2 weeks for Gary to come back with pictures. Elijah meeting Rebecca Stone at a boutique hotel in Washington, D.C., their faces close as they kissed. Olivia's tears fell onto the photographs as she stared, numb. The next day, she quietly installed a small security camera in their bedroom, cleverly hidden behind an ornate lamp. Elijah's late nights would lead to discussions on speakerphone or hushed phone calls in the privacy of their marital space. She needed it all recorded. She also carried a discreet audio recorder, hoping to capture any incriminating conversations. She felt guilty, as though she were betraying Elijah's privacy. But every time she hesitated, she remembered the pictures of him and Rebecca. The sting of betrayal hardened her resolve. Yet, No part of Olivia's heart was prepared for the day her husband would allow the unthinkable. A vicious confrontation within their home that would leave her gasping for air, battered not just in body, but in spirit. Nor was she prepared for the horrifying knowledge that it wasn't enough for Elijah and Rebecca to carry on their affair in secrecy. They wanted her silence, her compliance, and ultimately, her humiliation. Rebecca Stone had not grown up in the world of private tennis clubs and beachfront vacations. Raised by a single mother in a rundown apartment complex in Cleveland, she was taught to hustle from an early age. She used her beauty and wit to climb the social ladder. Over the years, men of influence gravitated towards her dark, seductive charm. She learned how to manipulate, to please, and to exploit the men who craved her attention. When she arrived in Arlington, she was just another pretty face, but her ambition soared higher than the black-tie dinners she attended. She wanted a man of status, wealth, and name, someone who could catapult her from a social climber to a queen of high society. Elijah Greenwood was exactly that. At first, she was just another business associate who latched onto him for networking opportunities. But as soon as she sensed the distance between Elijah and his pregnant wife, she swooped in to fill that void. Over sultry dinners and clandestine weekends at luxurious hotels, Rebecca studied Elijah's vulnerabilities and fed them back to him with flattery and submission. Before Elijah fully understood the depths of her cunning, he was enthralled, blindly protective of her. She felt invincible until she realized that Olivia Greenwood was no naive pushover. It unsettled Rebecca that despite the pregnancy and heartbreak, Olivia still looked graceful, composed, and respectable in public. More frustrating yet, Olivia's reputation for kindness and philanthropic work made her a darling of the community. If Elijah were to ever choose between them on the basis of public sympathy, Olivia would win by a landslide. But if the pregnant wife were exposed, humiliated, or made to look unstable, that advantage could shift. Rebecca had a plan. She wanted to provoke Olivia, to gaslight her into a meltdown, to ensure that when the dust settled, Elijah would declare his wife unfit and choose her, Rebecca Stone, as the rightful companion to his empire. One rainy Sunday afternoon, Olivia was about to head upstairs for a nap when the doorbell rang. Through the stained glass window, she saw a flash of red and the outlines of an unfamiliar figure. The butler answered, and in walked Rebecca Stone, accompanied by a gust of rained air. Her boldness was staggering. Rebecca had the gall to show up unannounced at the Greenwood mansion. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest. She stepped forward, one hand instinctively resting on her stomach. "Rebecca, is it?" The mistress smiled. "Yes, Mrs. Greenwood," she replied, her tone saccharine. "I hope I'm not intruding." "I'm not sure what you want," Olivia said, her voice tight with an undercurrent of anger. "But you should leave." Rebecca raised her eyebrows in feigned surprise. "Oh, but I'm here at Elijah's invitation. He told me to drop by if I was in the area. You see, we have some business to discuss." A quiet tension choked the air. The staff had discreetly withdrawn, leaving the two women facing off in the foyer. Olivia refused to play hostess. She glared at Rebecca, exhaustion and fury swirling inside her. "Well, Elijah isn't here," she said succinctly. "So come back another time." Before Rebecca could respond, the rumble of an engine sounded outside. Moments later, Elijah stepped in through the open door, shaking rain from his umbrella. He froze upon seeing both women, his eyes flickering with panic, though he quickly forced a smile. "Oh, I see you two have met," he said, the tension in his voice betraying his false nonchalance. "What is she doing here?" Olivia demanded, ignoring the forced pleasantries. "I invited her," Elijah said, trying to steady his tone. "She's involved in a proposal with one of my startup investments. Let's discuss it in the living room." Rebecca interjected smoothly, placing a hand on Elijah's arm as though it was the most natural thing in the world. Olivia saw it clearly, the same confident gesture that had so unsettled her at the charity event. Elijah didn't shake her off. "How dare you?" Olivia whispered, her eyes filling with tears. Elijah avoided his wife's gaze. "Let's just talk," he said, guiding Rebecca towards the living room. Olivia felt her world tipping upside down. She followed them, rage and heartbreak clashing within her. In the grand living room, the tension mounted. Rebecca sat elegantly on the white sofa, crossing her long legs, while Elijah paced near the fireplace. Olivia stood at the threshold, uncertain whether she should demand the mistress leave or wait for Elijah to do the right thing. "We should keep this civil," Elijah began. "I asked Rebecca to come because—" "Cut the nonsense!" Olivia snapped, tears threatening to spill. "You think I'm blind? I have eyes, Elijah. I know exactly who she is to you." Rebecca shrugged, feigning innocence. "I'm just a business associate. If you can't handle your husband's professional relationships, maybe it says more about you than about me." A wave of shock rippled through Olivia. She was no fighter by nature, but for the sake of her unborn child, for the sake of her dignity, she refused to cower. Still, something made her hold back, to calm herself. She quickly remembered the small recorder hidden under her loose sweater, pinned inside a specially sewn pocket. She was capturing all of this, and that knowledge fortified her. "All right," Olivia forced herself to say in a measured tone. "If there's some business to discuss, I'm sure we can handle it another time. Today is a family day. I'd appreciate it if you left, Miss Stone." The standoff lasted several seconds. Finally, Rebecca rose and brushed imaginary dust from her coat. "Of course. I'll be in touch, Elijah." She moved towards Olivia, close enough that Olivia caught a trace of the expensive perfume. Leaning in, Rebecca whispered, "I'll see you around, Mrs. Greenwood. Take care of that baby." Olivia's blood turned to ice. She struggled to keep her composure as the mistress stalked out of the room, leaving an impenetrable cloud of tension in her wake. When she was gone, Olivia turned to Elijah, tears now streaming. "I want the truth," she demanded. "Are you sleeping with her?" Elijah stared at the roaring fireplace, shoulders tense. After a long silence, he mumbled, "We're just close friends. We work together. You're letting your imagination run wild." Fury burned through Olivia. She turned on her heel and stormed up the stairs, aware that everything had been recorded. However this ended, she would have proof of Elijah's betrayal and of the mistress's audacity. In the days that followed, Elijah tried to maintain an air of normalcy, but the rift between them yawned wider than ever. He occasionally spent nights at the office, seldom answered her calls, and often claimed his phone was dead or on silent when she needed him. Meanwhile, Olivia busied herself under the guidance of Gary Thompson with collecting evidence. Every so often, late at night, Elijah would return to their bedroom and mutter half-hearted apologies, murmurs about stress at work, about deals going south. At first, Olivia tried to glean if he was truly remorseful or just stalling, but it quickly became obvious Elijah was addicted to the rush of this new affair. Despite his claims of just friendship, he spent more time with Rebecca than ever. Indeed, once Olivia witnessed an unapologetic, brazen phone conversation on the balcony. "I'll come by tomorrow, baby," Elijah said. "You know how much I need you." Olivia listened, trembling with fury, her mind on the hidden camera capturing every last word. Let him lie, she thought, because the moment for truth is coming. It happened one Saturday afternoon that felt more like a showdown than a day of rest. The estate was quiet. Some of the staff had taken off, and those remaining were discreetly out of sight. Olivia was in the kitchen preparing herself a quick meal when Elijah waltzed in with Rebecca in tow, without warning again. Their voices carried an air of forced cheerfulness, as if they'd come home from a pleasant outing. It was a jarring sight for Olivia, the mistress strolling through her kitchen like she owned the place. "Really?" Olivia asked, setting down the knife she'd been using to chop vegetables. Her face was pale, a mixture of disbelief and anger. "Again? You're here?" Elijah cast Olivia an irritated glance. We need to use the study. Business. Rebecca smirked. Don't worry, Mrs. Greenwood, I'll make sure we don't disturb you. Enjoy your cooking. Olivia nearly choked on her anger, balling her fists at her sides. She forced herself to appear calm, remembering the recorder tucked beneath her blouse. She followed them to the study, refusing to be left out of earshot this time. The tension was palpable as Olivia hovered near the door. Why do you insist on doing this in our home? She demanded, tears trembling on her lashes. Elijah, have you no respect for me or our child? Rebecca rolled her eyes. Oh, spare us the theatrics. How dare you? How dare I what? Rebecca snapped. Be his future? You're just a stepping stone he married to look respectable, but now he has me. And let's be honest, Liv, you're not the vibrant woman you were. Perhaps you've let yourself go. Pregnancy can do that, can't it? Rage and heartbreak coalesced in Olivia's chest. Her breath came in short gasps as she shot a pleading glance at Elijah. Are you going to let her speak to me like that? Elijah swallowed, torn. He watched the two women with rising panic, but ultimately, he sighed. Enough, Olivia. You're making this worse. Olivia couldn't believe her ears. I'm making this worse? You bring your mistress under our roof, and you're blaming me for your indiscretion. Rebecca advanced with a sneer, eyes narrowed. She flicked her hair back. He's tired of you. Once the baby is born, maybe you can fade into the background and let me take care of him. Olivia's indignation reached a boiling point. For once in her life, she felt the urge to lunge at someone, but she remembered the recorder and forced herself to remain in control. If she lashed out physically, she'd only feed any narrative that she was unstable. Get out of my house! She hissed, each word laced with venom. Rebecca gave a chilling laugh. Or what? In the next moment, a silence fell so thick one could almost touch it. Then, it happened in a blur. Rebecca raised her hand and slapped Olivia across the face. The crack echoed off the high ceilings. Olivia stumbled back, hand instinctively shielding her belly from harm. For a second, she couldn't breathe. Pain radiated across her cheek, mixing with the shock that this had actually happened. The two locked eyes, Rebecca's burning with triumph, Olivia's brimming with tears of betrayal. Elijah, stunned, took a step forward, but hesitated, torn between the two women. Instead of defending his pregnant wife, he turned to Rebecca and put a hand on her arm as if to calm her. Rebecca, that was... You shouldn't have. But he didn't rage at Rebecca. He didn't order her out. In fact, his concern seemed to be more about controlling the chaos than protecting his wife. And as if an invisible sword had severed the last thread of hope within Olivia, she registered the grim reality. The man she loved was gone. She turned, her eyes fierce despite the tear tracks on her face, and her trembling hand pressed harder against her stomach. You'll regret this, she told them both, her voice quivering with deep emotion. Then she spun on her heel and fled, ignoring Elijah's half-hearted call after her. But on her phone, pressed in her sweater pocket, the audio recorder had caught every word. And the hidden camera in the study, which Elijah had failed to notice, had captured every moment. The mistress's bold assault, Elijah's weak defense, the pregnant wife's heartbreak. It was all there, an undeniable record of brutality and betrayal. And though Olivia's cheek throbbed from the slap, the resolve in her heart only hardened. Olivia retreated to her bedroom, heart pounding, tears flowing freely. She looked at her reflection in the mirror, seeing the red imprint of Rebecca's hand. She felt humiliated, and her unborn baby seemed to respond to her emotional turmoil with restless movement. A wave of dizziness overcame her. She collapsed onto the bed, pressing her palm to her clamoring heartbeat. Moments later, her personal nurse, Karen Brown, rushed in. Karen was a gentle soul in her late 40s, with warm hazel eyes and a reassuring smile. "Mrs. Greenwood," she exclaimed, helping Olivia sit up. "You're trembling. What happened?" Between ragged breaths, Olivia recounted the confrontation. Karen's face turned pale with shock. She carefully examined Olivia's cheek and asked if she felt any stomach pain. We need to ensure the baby is okay. Let's take your blood pressure and check the fetal heart rate." While Karen busied herself with medical instruments, Olivia tried to calm her swirling thoughts. She had never felt so violated, so betrayed. "This is no longer just about me," she reminded herself. "My child could have been harmed." The wave of protective maternal instinct ignited in her. If Elijah didn't care, she would. If he wouldn't protect them, she would. Karen's expression eased somewhat when she found the baby's heartbeat strong. "You're under a lot of stress, Mrs. Greenwood. You should try to rest. Think about your health. Think about the baby." Olivia nodded, tears welling up again. Karen's kindness only made her heartbreak more acute. With her nurse's help, she freshened up, changing into comfortable clothes, and stayed locked in her bedroom for the rest of the day. Meanwhile, she could hear footsteps and hushed voices downstairs. Occasionally, the house would fall deathly silent. Then she'd hear the distant sound of a car engine revving. She guessed Rebecca had left, and a part of her wondered if Elijah had gone with her. Yet she did not seek him out or text him. She needed time to think, to plan her next move, to heal from the emotional and physical blow. Late that night, footsteps outside her door announced Elijah's hesitant arrival. She heard the door creak open. Without turning on the lights, he approached her bedside. "Olivia," he murmured, "I just want to say, I'm sorry about what happened." Her jaw clenched, bitterness rising in her throat. "You let her strike me, Elijah. You took her side, effectively." He stammered, "I'm sorry she shouldn't have done that, but you provoked her." At that, Olivia let out a strangled laugh. "You're blaming me? Do you hear yourself?" He sighed. "Look, things have gotten complicated. You're hormonal, stressed. Just leave," she whispered, choking on her sobs. "You're the last person I want to see right now." Elijah said nothing more. The silence was enough. He turned and left, the door clicking shut behind him. Olivia stared at the ceiling, consumed by heartbreak, but buoyed by a fierce resolve. She was done being the victim. She was done waiting for apologies that never came. She was done letting Elijah and Rebecca call the shots. With daylight came a renewed sense of purpose. Olivia spent the morning gathering every recording she had, the camera's footage of the slap, the audio capturing Elijah's betrayal, and the private investigator's photographs of Elijah and Rebecca's hotel trysts. She compiled them neatly into digital files, backing them up on multiple drives. That afternoon, she contacted James Campbell, a respected family lawyer known for his determination in defending the wronged spouses of high-net-worth individuals. Olivia explained her entire situation, from the affair to the physical assault. James, speaking in a steady, reassuring tone, agreed to meet her privately at a remote office in Fairfax, a precaution to avoid any media speculation or accidental leaks. The Greenwood name carried weight, and a scandal of this magnitude could become tabloid fodder overnight. At the meeting, James listened intently. Olivia described the humiliation, the heartbreak, and her deep concern for her unborn child. She confessed that she wasn't sure if she wanted a divorce yet, but she needed a plan. She couldn't stand by and allow Elijah's betrayal to continue unchecked. James steepled his fingers. "Olivia, you have a strong case for legal separation or immediate divorce, if you choose. The physical assault on you, especially while pregnant, is egregious. Even if it was the mistress who struck you, Elijah's complicity, his failure to protect you, only strengthens your position. And with the recordings, you have direct evidence of what happened." Olivia's tears glistened as she rubbed her abdomen in slow circles. "I just want to protect my baby. But I also want Elijah to realize what he's done. I want him to feel the consequences." James nodded sympathetically. "We can craft a strategy. You're not obligated to share these recordings yet. We could approach him privately first, present the evidence, and negotiate from a position of power. Or if you want full public vindication, we can pursue that too." She took a shaky breath, eyes flashing with determination. "Let me think about it. But I won't be silent anymore. He needs to realize I won't be shoved aside." James placed a hand gently on hers. "I understand. Take your time. But remember, time is also your leverage. Keep the upper hand by deciding when and how to reveal your evidence." Back at Hillside Heights, word of tension within the Greenwood home began to spread, courtesy of the vigilant staff who had witnessed more than they dared to admit. Rumors floated around social circles. Was Elijah Greenwood's marriage on the rocks? Did the pregnant Olivia appear more withdrawn? Some wondered if Elijah was cheating. Others guessed it was business woes. Meanwhile, Rebecca Stone continued to flaunt her association with Elijah, popping up at events, arriving in his Bentley, and letting rumors swirl. She loved the attention. It fed her ego to be seen with him. When confronted by mutual acquaintances about her closeness to a married man whose wife was pregnant, she merely gave a coy smile, neither confirming nor denying. For Olivia, the next few weeks felt like walking through a minefield of heartbreak, anger, and scrutiny. Yet she clung to the knowledge of her well-documented evidence. Each time Elijah came home smelling of Rebecca's perfume, each time he avoided her gaze, she reminded herself, "I have the power to expose you." It was a fragile equilibrium. On one side, her desire to preserve her child's stable future. On the other, her longing for retribution and the ultimate, humiliating downfall of those who wronged her. Even though Elijah avoided the topic of the slap, tension pulsed in their home. Rebecca didn't come around as often, perhaps because Elijah sensed he was pushing Olivia too far. Yet, ironically, his mistress's hold on him seemed unbreakable. When confronted, he spewed half-truths and excuses, but never truly left Rebecca. Olivia felt the weight of her unborn baby. The pregnancy advanced, her belly becoming more noticeable. Her maternal instincts roared that she had to shield this child from a toxic environment. The question was whether to do it quietly or to wage open war. Night after night, she tossed in bed, searching her heart for the right path. Olivia hadn't planned on releasing the evidence so soon. She intended to hold it like a trump card for the right moment. But life sometimes dictates our steps in unexpected ways. During a midday lunch with her friend Madison, Olivia's phone buzzed repeatedly. She glanced at the screen to find a barrage of frantic messages. A swirling sense of dread coursed through her. She opened her social media apps and found chaos. A video clip had been leaked online, footage from the Greenwood Mansion study. It showed a heavily pregnant Olivia face-to-face with Elijah and Rebecca Stone. The culminating moment, the slap, played in crisp detail, followed by Elijah's half-baked attempt to calm Rebecca. Thousands of views poured in, accompanied by an avalanche of comments. Some expressed horror at the assault. Others spewed vile speculation about the Greenwood marriage, and a few even blamed Olivia for provoking the confrontation. Trembling, Olivia realized that the file she had carefully guarded must have been compromised. But how? She dialed Gary Thompson, the private investigator, who insisted he had kept everything secure. Next, she rang James Campbell. "James, the video is out. This changes everything," she said, her voice shaking with a blend of panic and strange relief. James cursed under his breath. "Then we act fast. Olivia, call Elijah. Tell him you want an immediate meeting. Offer him a chance to settle things privately, or you'll escalate this." She fumbled with her phone, uncertain if she could face Elijah directly. But she had no choice. After hours of ignoring her calls, Elijah finally picked up. He sounded angry, frantic. "Olivia, have you lost your mind? This video is all over the internet, humiliating me, humiliating our family," she interrupted, her voice trembling. "I didn't leak it, Elijah. But maybe it's exactly what you deserve. Now the world sees what happened." He swallowed. "Let's handle this quietly. We'll say it's a doctored video, some elaborate hoax. A humorless laugh escaped her. Seriously? A hoax? That won't work. The evidence is too detailed. And do you think I'd lie to protect you and your mistress after she assaulted me and endangered our baby? Silence followed. Eventually, Elijah conceded. What do you want? Meet me at James Campbell's office tomorrow at 10 Chi, Olivia said. We'll discuss terms. She hung up, heart thundering. For once, Elijah sounded unsure, even scared. Rebecca's humiliating assault on a pregnant wife had gone viral, and Elijah's complicity was center stage for the entire world to judge. Maybe karma has come calling, Olivia thought, a flicker of grim satisfaction warring with her heartbreak. The next morning, Olivia arrived at James Campbell's discreet office, nestled in a quieter part of Fairfax. The building was unremarkable, providing privacy for high-profile clients. Inside the sleek conference room, she waited with James, who had neatly arranged a stack of paperwork and evidence, including high-quality stills from the video. At exactly 10 where the door swung open. Elijah stepped in, looking haggard and older than his 30-something years. Behind him was an attorney of his own, Rachel Donovan, a formidable litigator. Everyone took a seat at the polished mahogany table. Tension practically crystallized in the air. James cleared his throat. Thank you for coming. Let's begin by clarifying the objective. We're here to address the release of the video, the misconduct of Miss Stone, and how we move forward to ensure the best outcome for Mrs. Greenwood and her unborn child. Elijah shot Olivia a scathing look. You humiliated me. She swallowed her anger. I did nothing except protect myself. The world saw the truth. You're the one who humiliated me, us, by flaunting your mistress and allowing that assault to happen. Rachel Donovan interjected, We'd like to see the original copy of the footage. Our team believes it could have been edited to portray Ms. Stone and Mr. Greenwood in a misleading light. James handed over a USB drive. That's the unedited version. You'll find it's the same. The timestamp is consistent, the audio is crystal clear. Miss Donovan, there's no distortion here. For a moment, Rachel sifted through the files on her laptop, frowning. She realized the evidence was airtight. Her posture shifted from aggressive to conciliatory. Well, Miss Stone's actions were out of line. As for Mr. Greenwood, you can see he tried to stop her. Not nearly enough, Olivia snapped. She took a deep breath, forcing composure. Elijah, I'm not trying to milk you for money. I have plenty, given that we're married. But I won't allow this to continue. James slid a document forward. These are potential terms for a legal separation, with an option to file for a no-fault divorce based on irreconcilable differences. We have also included a clause for a restraining order against Mrs. Stone. Should Miss Stone approach Mrs. Greenwood or threaten her again, there will be immediate legal repercussions. Elijah's fingers tapped nervously on the table. You want a divorce? Olivia closed her eyes momentarily, tears burning behind her lids. She opened them to glare at him. You've left me no choice. Either you end your affair immediately and publicly disavow Rebecca Stone, or we separate. And believe me, Elijah, I have enough evidence for a massive settlement and full custody of our child, not to mention the public image disaster you're already facing. He ran a hand over his face. Do you think you can threaten me into compliance? It's not a threat. It's the reality you created, Olivia said. Choose her, and you lose me, your child, and possibly your fortune. Or choose me, and prove you'll do right by our family. But if you do, the first condition is a restraining order against Rebecca. Silence descended. Elijah looked torn, eyes flicking between the documents on the table and the stormy gaze of his wife. In that moment, he seemed to recognize the gravity of his actions, the family he had betrayed. But was it enough to make him change course? Eventually, he mumbled, "Let me think it over." Rachel nodded, grabbing Elijah's elbow, and they left the conference room. Olivia watched the door close behind them, a pang of sadness under her anger. She had loved him deeply once. Now she saw only a weak man swaying in the face of accountability. James turned to her gently. "How do you feel?" She exhaled shakily. Terrible, but also free. If he chooses her, I'm done. I won't compromise anymore. While Elijah deliberated his next move, Rebecca seethed. The leaked video had drawn a storm of negative press. Overnight, she became a pariah in the social circles she had so carefully cultivated. Sponsors for her personal projects evaporated. The exclusive invitations ceased. People whispered behind her back at every gathering she dared to attend. The same men who once clamored for her attention now distanced themselves from the scandal. Angered by the abrupt shift in her fortunes, she blamed Olivia for everything, convinced the pregnant wife had leaked the footage out of spite. She tried phoning Elijah, only to have her calls frequently ignored or cut short. On the rare occasions he did answer, he sounded vague, burdened. The man who once offered her the world now acted like she was a liability. Fueled by desperation, Rebecca devised a plan. In the depth of night, she crept toward Greenwood Mansion, parked her car a short distance away, and made her way through a side gate. Olivia was asleep in an upstairs bedroom. The staff had mostly retired. The security system was activated, but Rebecca knew the basics of bypassing sensors from her earlier visits. She slinked into the garden, past the hedges, and approached the glass doors leading to the living room. Inside, subdued lights cast a warm glow. Rebecca tried the door. Locked. Cursing silently, she fumbled for a hairpin in her purse, but the lock was too sophisticated. Her frustration burned. She peered through the glass, glimpsing a faint silhouette moving upstairs. She realized with bitterness that if she couldn't physically confront Olivia, she needed to unleash havoc another way. She took out her phone, pressed record, and began speaking in a hushed voice, spinning her version of the events, accusations that Olivia had physically attacked her, that the pregnant wife had staged the entire incident for blackmail. "I'm here to beg for peace," Rebecca lied to the camera. "But they won't even open the door. They leaked that video to ruin me. Olivia Greenwood is the real villain." She recorded this twisted narrative with crocodile tears, hoping to garner sympathy online. Little did she know that security cameras around the property were capturing her every move, and the guard on duty noticed suspicious movement on the monitors. Soon, an alarm was triggered. Spotlights illuminated the garden. Rebecca froze like a deer in headlights, phone clattering from her hands. The guard dashed out with a flashlight, ordering her to stop. Panicked, she fled the property, narrowly making it to her car before the police arrived. She zoomed off into the night, the shrill echo of sirens trailing her. Inside the mansion, Olivia stood at her bedroom window, heart pounding. She hadn't seen the intruder's face, but she suspected it might be Rebecca. Fear and anger warred within her. She realized how far her husband's mistress would go for retaliation, and she knew the final showdown was imminent. Days passed in a tense stalemate. Elijah, feeling cornered, tried to contact Olivia repeatedly. At James Campbell's urging, she refused to meet him alone. She had heard from the mansion's guard that the intruder who fled was indeed a tall brunette in a sleek sports car. The guard suspected it was Rebecca Stone. After the incident, Olivia petitioned the court for a temporary restraining order against Rebecca, providing the security footage as evidence. A hearing was set to finalize it. In the meantime, Olivia moved out of the Greenwood mansion for her own safety, temporarily residing at a friend's penthouse downtown. She felt heartbreak at leaving her home, but relief that she no longer breathed the same air that once stank of betrayal. She also set up an advanced security system to protect herself from future intrusions. The hearing day arrived. A modest courtroom filled with legal professionals and a handful of journalists, all hungry for details of the Greenwood scandal. Olivia sat with James, her posture exuding confidence, though her hands trembled slightly in her lap. Elijah was present, looking drawn, trying to avoid eye contact with her. Rebecca Stone appeared in stylish attire, her face tense. Her lawyer remained stoic by her side. The judge called the session to order. James presented the evidence. The footage of the assault, the pictures of the nighttime intrusion, the previous audio and video recordings capturing Rebecca's aggression. Rebecca's lawyer attempted to argue that the video was incomplete and that she only slapped Olivia in self-defense. Gasps rippled through the small courtroom at the absurdity of that claim, but the judge, unimpressed by empty words, studied the unedited footage carefully. The moment of the slap was unmistakably unprovoked. The intrusion on the mansion's property was recorded from multiple angles. The judge lifted his gaze over the rim of his glasses. "Miss Stone, your actions are clearly documented. I find it hard to see how you can claim self-defense." A hush fell. Rebecca's cheeks burned. She glanced at Elijah, who kept his eyes on the floor. At last the judge spoke. "I'm granting Miss Greenwood's request for a restraining order, effective immediately. Miss Stone, you are not to approach Mrs. Greenwood or her residence under any circumstances. Failure to comply will result in arrest." Rebecca let out a small hiss, her eyes tearing with frustrated rage. As the gavel banged, ensuring that the restraining order was set, she lunged out of her seat, ignoring her lawyer's attempts to restrain her. "You did this to me!" she screamed at Olivia. "You'll pay!" Her lawyer and a bailiff quickly subdued her, though the tension in the room soared. Cameras clicked, capturing her enraged expression. The bailiff escorted her out, muttering about contempt of court if she didn't calm down. Olivia watched, her heart thumping. Elijah remained still, shoulders sagging. Outside the courtroom, a throng of reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. They peppered Olivia with questions about the affair, the assault, the restraining order. She offered a simple statement. "I want peace for my unborn child. I trust the legal system to protect us." Then James whisked her away to a waiting car. That night, the local news and social media exploded with coverage. Rebecca Stone's meltdown was the lead story on every talk show. Public sympathy swung heavily in Olivia's favor, painting her as the wronged wife standing up to a conniving mistress. Elijah Greenwood, now famously entangled in the scandal, withdrew from public appearances, issuing a bland statement about family matters. For the first time, it seemed the tide had turned firmly in Olivia's favor. A week later, Elijah reached out to Olivia through James, requesting a private meeting without lawyers, media, or any possibility of eavesdropping. He insisted it was important. Initially hesitant, Olivia ultimately agreed, hoping for closure. They met at a quiet cafe outside town. Olivia arrived first, seating herself at a corner table by the window, her bodyguards discreetly stationed nearby. Dressed in a flowing maternity dress, she cradled her belly with one hand. She now carried the quiet confidence of someone who had faced her demons and refused to be broken. Elijah slipped in, wearing dark sunglasses. He looked every inch the disgraced millionaire, weighed down by scandal and guilt. Sitting opposite her, he removed his sunglasses, revealing tired eyes. For a few seconds, neither spoke. The memory of their early love and the child they had conceived out of that love hung unspoken between them. Finally, Elijah cleared his throat. "Olivia, I'm sorry. I've ended things with Rebecca." She studied him carefully. "And I'm supposed to believe you?" He gave a defeated shrug. "You don't have to believe me. I just want you to know she's out of my life, especially after that court fiasco. She's turned vindictive. My associates have threatened to pull out of deals because of the bad publicity. Everything's a mess." Olivia's expression hardened. "So you didn't end it because you realized you hurt me beyond measure? You ended it for business reasons?" Elijah's face flickered with regret. "That's not fair. I do care about you and the baby. I lost my head. I got swept up in something new, exciting, and I was too blind to see the damage." She folded her hands over her stomach. "So what do you want? Another chance? Do you imagine we can go back to how we were?" He glanced away, his voice trembling. "I'm begging you. Let's try to salvage our marriage. I don't want to lose you. I don't want to be a distant father." The old Olivia might have melted, might have crumbled at his sorrowful plea. But she remembered the sting of betrayal, the night Rebecca slapped her, Elijah's absolute failure to protect her. She recalled the deception, the humiliations, the lonely nights crying herself to sleep. "Why should I trust you again?" she asked softly. He leaned forward, his voice urgent. "I'll do anything you ask. I'll publicly denounce Rebecca, hold a press conference if you want, give you full financial transparency, sign any post-nuptial agreement. Just come home." A swirl of emotions battled in Olivia's mind. She thought of how this man had once been her everything, how she carried his child. But she also remembered how close she had come to losing herself in his betrayals. Finally, her voice quavered with a mixture of sorrow and resolve. "It's too late for that, Elijah. Our love, you destroyed it, and I deserve better. Our baby deserves a stable, loving environment, not a father who strays and allows his mistress to assault me." Tears welled in Elijah's eyes, but he nodded slowly, as if realizing the depth of his loss. In that moment, the ring of his phone cut through the tension. He glanced at the screen, grimacing. "It's my attorney. I have to." Olivia lifted a hand. "Go. We're done here." He lingered for a moment, searching her eyes for any sign of mercy. Seeing none, he stood up and left, the sun shining harshly on him as he stepped out of the cafe. For the first time, Olivia felt a sense of finality, a sense that she was walking away from a broken life into an unknown but possibly brighter future. Over the next few months, the legal separation proceeded smoothly, thanks to the overwhelming evidence stacked in Olivia's favor. Elijah agreed to a generous settlement, a substantial trust fund for their child, and relinquished any claim to physically cohabitate with Olivia unless she changed her mind. He also agreed to monitored visitation rights upon the child's birth, dependent on Olivia's comfort level. Throughout her final trimester, Olivia experienced moments of sorrow and nostalgia. The Greenwood mansion, which she had once loved, became a symbol of heartbreak. She chose to sell it, wanting a fresh start. With the settlement, she purchased a smaller but cozy estate in a family-friendly neighborhood near the city. She designed a bright, cheerful nursery, hung pastel curtains, and arranged plush toys for the baby's arrival. News of Elijah Greenwood's downfall circulated among business circles. His brand took a severe hit. Investors pulled out, fearing the scandal's stain. As for Rebecca Stone, rumors swirled that she had fled Virginia, seeking a new playground for her social climbing. Some claimed she tried to blackmail Elijah for hush money, but her credibility was shot, and her name was tarnished beyond repair. Meanwhile, Olivia found herself at the receiving end of compassionate support from old acquaintances and from strangers alike who reached out on social media to commend her bravery. She continued her charity work, hoping to turn her pain into a force for good. She also took prenatal classes, forming new friendships with other expectant mothers who marveled at her strength. In the quiet of her new home, she often replayed the chain of events that led her here: the betrayal, the violence, the public showdown, the heartbreak, and ultimately, the choice to forge her own path away from the shadows of Elijah Greenwood. Olivia went into labor on a calm evening, the sky painted with a pink and gold sunset. She called Karen Brown, her loyal nurse, and rushed to the hospital. After hours of labor pains, amidst tears and determination, she brought a beautiful baby girl into the world. She named her Hope, a testament to what she had clung to in her darkest hours. Elijah, alerted by hospital staff, arrived at the waiting room. He desperately wanted a glimpse of his child. Torn between anger and empathy, Olivia eventually allowed him a brief visit. For a few tender minutes, he stood at Olivia's bedside, gazing at Hope with awe and sorrow. "She's perfect," he whispered, tears brimming. Olivia, exhausted but resolute, nodded. "She is." They exchanged no more words. For her, The baby's birth signified a new beginning, free from the shackles of betrayal. For Elijah, it was a bittersweet reminder of what he'd lost. Weeks later, Olivia settled into a routine as a single mother, with the unwavering support of friends, family, and professionals. Late-night feedings were tiring, but each time she looked into Hope's eyes, she felt a surge of purpose. No longer was she the submissive wife who lived in Elijah's shadow. She had her own life, her own resources, her own voice. As part of her healing journey, she recorded a heartfelt video message, this time intentional, not covert. Sitting in Hope's pastel nursery, she filmed herself sharing her story, her vulnerabilities, and her newfound strength. She spoke directly to women who might be enduring a similar ordeal, urging them to stand up for themselves, to document evidence, to trust their instincts. She emphasized how shame and silence only enable abusers and betrayers to continue. "Your worth," Olivia said in the video, eyes shining with conviction, "is not determined by someone else's disrespect. No matter how powerful they are, no matter how deeply you've loved them, when they treat you like less, you must fight for your dignity." She posted the video on her social media accounts. Within days, it went viral, garnering an outpouring of support. Women from all walks of life thanked her for shining a light on betrayal and domestic abuse. Donations to her chosen charity soared, and she realized that her personal nightmare had become a rallying cry for others seeking hope. Elijah remained largely absent, consumed by legal battles, financial losses, and a tarnished reputation. Sometimes he messaged, wanting to see the baby, but Olivia made it clear he had to abide by the scheduled visitation plan. Slowly, she felt the heartbreak recede. A cautious sense of peace replaced it. Olivia Greenwood's life became a testament to resilience. No longer defined by her husband's betrayal, she stepped forward as a woman who had reclaimed her power. Yes, the scandal rocked the high society of Hillside Heights. Yes, tongues wagged for months. But in the end, Olivia realized she owed no explanations to gossip mongers. Her focus was on her daughter, Hope, a delicate life born amidst chaos, now swaddled in the promise of love and stability. Elijah's fate receded like a cautionary tale, and Rebecca Stone's name vanished as quickly as her once grand ambitions. Today, Olivia stands on her own, forging new business ventures and dedicating herself to charity efforts that empower other women. And each night, as she cradles hope in the soft glow of a bedside lamp, she whispers, "We are free," embracing the quiet strength she fought so hard to earn. It was a fierce fight, recorded and won. Thank you for joining me on this intense journey of heartbreak, betrayal, and ultimate triumph. Olivia's story shows us that sometimes the people closest to us can become our greatest adversaries. Yet within that darkness, there's always hope. If you were riveted by her struggle, if you felt your heart pound when she stood up against injustice, imagine what a little more awareness and courage can do in real life. Now, I'd love your support in spreading this powerful message of resilience and self-worth. Like this video if you believe in Olivia's fearless stand. Share it with friends or family who might need a reminder that no matter the betrayal, there's a path to victory. And subscribe to my channel for more real-life drama, stories, heart-stirring moments, and lessons we can all learn from. Together, let's celebrate bravery and keep inspiring. The air in the courtroom was a frozen thing, thick with the scent of old paper and the unspoken contempt of powerful men. On one side sat Caleb Thorne, a lawyer whose $1,000 suit was as sharp as his predatory smile, flanking a CEO whose net worth could buy the city block they were in. On the other side sat Amara Sterling. She wasn't just silent, she was a void. While accusations of corporate espionage and betrayal, amounting to a staggering $50 million lawsuit, were piled upon her, she offered nothing. No tears, no defense, no denial. Her silence was her sin, a confession in the eyes of the judge and jury. They saw a guilty woman, a broken employee. They had no way of knowing they were witnessing not an execution, but the quiet, patient setup of the most devastating checkmate the corporate world would ever see. The Honorable Judge Marcus Holloway peered down from his elevated throne of justice, his spectacles perched on the end of his nose like a disapproving bird. His gaze was fixed on the defendant, Amara Sterling. The courtroom, a grand wood-paneled chamber designed to inspire awe and intimidation, seemed to have succeeded only in the latter. It was day 3 of the civil trial, Omnicorp versus Sterling, and for 3 days the defendant had uttered not a single word in her own defense. "Ms. Sterling," Judge Holloway began, his voice a low rumble of impatience, "I will ask you one more time. Do you have anything to say in response to the plaintiff's claims? Anything at all?" Amara sat perfectly still at the defendant's table. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap. Her attire was simple, a charcoal grey dress, impeccably clean but clearly off the rack. It stood in stark contrast to the bespoke Italian wool worn by Omnicorp's CEO, Marcus Van Doren, who watched her with a look of smug satisfaction. Beside him, his lead counsel, Caleb Thorne, flashed a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. Amara's eyes, deep and dark, held a profound stillness. They weren't vacant, but they were unreadable. She offered the judge a slight, almost imperceptible shake of her head. A frustrated sigh escaped the judge's lips. He turned to Amara's court-appointed lawyer, a young, earnest, and thoroughly overwhelmed man named David Chen. "Mr. Chen, is your client capable of understanding these proceedings?" David stood, shuffling his papers. "Yes, Your Honor. She is. My client is exercising her right to remain silent." Caleb Thorne let out a short, derisive laugh that he barely bothered to stifle. "In a civil trial, Your Honor, her silence is an admission of guilt, and she knows it. We have presented irrefutable evidence, server logs, access codes, encrypted files transferred from her terminal to an external IP address. The data stolen was worth hundreds of millions in development costs. Our $50 million suit is, frankly, a conservative estimate of the damage this woman has inflicted upon Omnicorp." Thorne gestured dramatically toward Amara. "Look at her, a disgruntled archivist in a forgotten subsidiary, earning a pittance. She saw an opportunity for a big payday, a chance to sell our secrets to the highest bidder, and she took it. And now, caught red-handed, she has nothing to say. What more proof does this court need?" The narrative Thorne had woven was compelling because it was simple. It was a story of greed and consequence. Amara Sterling was an employee at DataSafe, a document storage company Omnicorp had acquired years ago and largely forgotten. Her role was digitizing old corporate records. Omnicorp's case claimed that in her menial role, she had stumbled upon research and development files for their next-generation microchip, codenamed Project Chimera, and had promptly siphoned them off. The evidence was, as Thorne stated, seemingly conclusive. The digital breadcrumbs led directly to her workstation and her login credentials. For David Chen, it was an impossible case. His client refused to give him anything. No alibi, no explanation, no denial. His only instruction, whispered to him in the hallway before the trial began, was, "Let them say everything they want to say. Don't object. Don't argue. Just let them build their story." It was professional suicide, but something in her calm, unwavering gaze made him, against all logic, comply. Now that story was complete. Judge Holloway looked from Thorne's confident smirk to Amara's placid face. His patience had worn thin. Without a defense, without any refutation of the evidence presented. This court has no alternative, the judge declared, his voice echoing with finality. In the matter of Omnicorp versus Sterling, I find for the plaintiff. The court orders Ms. Sterling to pay the full $50 million in damages sought by Omnicorp. Furthermore, a lien will be placed on all known assets, and her wages will be garnished for the remainder of her life, should it be necessary. This court is adjourned. The gavel struck wood with a sharp crack. It was over. Marcus Van Doren leaned over and clapped Caleb Thorne on the back, a wide grin spreading across his face. Their victory was absolute, their enemy crushed without a fight. Reporters in the back of the courtroom began scribbling furiously. Through it all, Amara Sterling didn't move. Her expression didn't change. As the powerful men who had just ruined her life celebrated, she simply closed her eyes for a brief moment, as if marking the end of a chapter. Then she opened them, stood with a quiet grace, and turned to her bewildered lawyer. "Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Chen," she said, her voice soft but clear, the first words she had spoken in the courtroom all week. "But, Amara, we lost. You've lost everything," he stammered, his mind reeling. A faint, enigmatic smile touched her lips. "The game isn't over, David," she replied, her gaze drifting past him to the celebrating victors. "They just made their move. Now, we wait for the board to change." The days following the verdict were a quiet humiliation. Amara's face was briefly plastered across business news websites and local television reports, a cautionary tale of a low-level employee who flew too close to the sun. The headlines were brutal. "Silent Secretary sunk by corporate espionage." "Omnicorp wins 50 Madametra's judgment against data thief." Marcus Van Doren and Caleb Thorne capitalized on the publicity, giving interviews where they spoke gravely about the importance of corporate security and loyalty. "It's a sad day when a trusted employee resorts to such treachery," Van Doren said to a reporter from the Wall Street Journal, his face a mask of corporate sorrow. But this verdict sends a clear message. Omnicorp will protect its intellectual property with the full force of the law. Thorne, in a separate interview, was more direct. "She never stood a chance. We had her cornered from the start. Her silence in court was the pathetic act of someone with no moves left to make. She knew she was guilty." While they basked in their victory, Amara navigated the fallout. Her bank account was frozen. An eviction notice was taped to the door of her small, one-bedroom apartment. Her meager possessions were now legally subject to seizure. Yet, she moved through her days with a preternatural calm. She packed her few belongings, clothes, a worn collection of classic novels, and an old handcrafted wooden chess set, into cardboard boxes. She didn't seem like a woman who had just been saddled with a debt she could never repay. She seemed like a woman preparing for a trip. Her evenings were spent in silence, seated at her small kitchen table, a single cup of chamomile tea warming her hands. Her mind would drift back, not to the courtroom, but to a quiet room in a discreet, private care facility on the outskirts of the city. It was a place called Maple Creek. It wasn't opulent, but it was peaceful, and it had been home to the most important person in her life, Silas. To the world, the name Silas Blackwood was a ghost, a legend from a bygone era of industry. He was the man who had built a sprawling, labyrinthine empire of technology, logistics, and finance in the mid-20th century. A titan who had shaken hands with presidents and kings. Then, 30 years ago, he had simply vanished from public life. He became a recluse, his name invoked in business schools as a case study, his whereabouts a subject of wild speculation. Most assumed he was dead. Amara knew better. To her, he wasn't the mythical Silas Blackwood. He was just Silas, her grandfather's best friend, and, after her family was lost in a tragic car accident when she was 8, her secret guardian. He had arranged for her to be raised by a loving foster family, providing for her anonymously, watching her from a distance. He had insisted she grow up without the crushing weight of his name and fortune. "Wealth can be a prison, Amara," he'd told her during one of their weekly visits, his voice raspy with age, but his eyes sharp as a hawk's. They would sit for hours, playing chess. He had taught her the game, but more than that, he had taught her its philosophy. "Every piece has a purpose," he'd say, tapping a pawn. "Even the smallest one can determine the outcome of the game. And remember the most important lesson. The queen is the most powerful piece on the board, but she is vulnerable. Power is not about loud moves. It's about position. It's about seeing the entire board 10 moves ahead, while your opponent is only looking at their next attack." He had been the one to get her the job at DataSafe, a company he had once owned before selling it to Omnicorp. He wanted her to see the belly of the beast, to understand how a massive corporation truly worked from the inside. A few months ago, his health had taken a sharp decline. In one of their last lucid conversations, he had looked at her with a grave intensity. "The vultures are circling, my dear," he'd whispered, his breath shallow. "Men like Van Doren. They built their careers on my foundations, and now they rot the timbers. They think I'm a senile old fool, or already dead. They're getting sloppy, arrogant." He had then laid out the plan, the final, grand game he had been setting up for years. He explained the fraud happening within Omnicorp's highest levels, the way Van Doren was cooking the books and using shell corporations to siphon money. "I'm going to give them a piece of bait," Silas had explained. "Evidence of their crimes, encrypted and disguised as R&D files. I'll put it where you can find it. They monitor everything, so they'll see you access it. They will assume the worst of you, because men like that always do. They will come after you with everything they have." "They'll destroy me, Silas," Amara had said, her voice trembling slightly. He had reached out and taken her hand, his grip surprisingly firm. "They will try, and you will do nothing. You will let them build their case. You will let them shout your guilt from the rooftops. You will let them win. You will sacrifice your queen." "Why?" "Because, my dear Amara," he'd said, a faint twinkle in his tired eyes. "In chess, the only thing more powerful than a queen's sacrifice is the one your opponent never sees coming. You will be silent. You will be condemned. And in doing so, you will force them to authenticate the very evidence that will be their undoing. It will be their word against a ghost's. By suing you, they are giving my ghost a voice in a court of law. Let them have their small victory. You are playing for the whole kingdom." He had passed away peacefully, a week before the trial began. Amara had mourned him in private, her grief a deep, quiet river. But his final lesson, his last grand strategy, was now in motion. As she sat in her apartment, surrounded by boxes, she wasn't a convicted corporate spy. She was a chess piece, placed in the perfect position, waiting for the next move to be announced. And she knew it was coming soon. On the 5th day after the verdict, the news broke like a global thunderclap. Silas Blackwood, reclusive billionaire and architect of modern industry, dead at 92. The headlines dominated every news network, every financial journal, every social media feed on the planet. The ghost was officially gone. Pundits and historians scrambled to contextualize his legacy, airing grainy black and white photos of a young, charismatic Silas shaking hands with visionaries and world leaders. They spoke of his genius, his ruthless business acumen, and his eventual, mystifying disappearance from the world stage. His fortune, having compounded in trusts and unseen investments for 3 decades, was the subject of frenzied speculation. Estimates ranged from $50 billion to well over $100 billion. He had no known wife, no children, no living relatives. The question on everyone's lips was, who gets the kingdom? At the gleaming, 100-story Omnicorp tower, Marcus Van Doren watched the news coverage from the 80-inch screen in his corner office. He felt a surge of adrenaline. "He's finally gone," he said to Caleb Thorne, who was sitting opposite him, nursing a glass of scotch. "The old dinosaur is extinct." "A legend, no doubt," Thorne replied smoothly. "His early investment in Omnicorp is the bedrock of this company." "He was a genius, I'll give him that," Van Doren conceded, swirling the amber liquid in his own glass. "He saw the future, but he lost his nerve, went soft, hid from the world. You can't rule from the shadows." Van Doren's connection to Blackwood was one he had carefully curated over the years. In reality, he had met the man twice, briefly in the early days of his career, when Silas was already divesting and stepping back. But in the public narrative Van Doren spun, he was Blackwood's protégé, the hand-picked successor to his vision for Omnicorp. His phone buzzed. It was a producer from CNBC. "Mr. Van Doren, we'd be honored if you would come on air to share your reflections on Mr. Blackwood's passing and his legacy." Van Doren's lips curved into a predatory smile. "Of course. It would be my honor to pay tribute to my mentor." For the next 24 hours, Marcus Van Doren was everywhere. He appeared on television, his face a mask of solemn respect, sharing manufactured anecdotes about Silas Blackwood's wisdom and foresight. "Silas taught me that business is about bold strokes, about vision," he said, looking directly into the camera. Omnicorp's recent victory in court against an attempt at corporate espionage is a perfect example of the principles he instilled in me. To protect one's creation at all costs. I believe he would have been proud. He was positioning himself, not just as a successful CEO, but as the spiritual heir to the Blackwood legacy. Many speculated that Omnicorp, or perhaps a charitable foundation run by Van Doren, would be a major beneficiary of the will. It was a masterclass in public relations, and Thorne and Van Doren were enjoying every moment of it. Meanwhile, in her nearly empty apartment, Amara watched Van Doren's television appearance on her small laptop. She saw the false sincerity, the calculated performance of grief. She felt no anger, only a cold, clear focus. She remembered Silas's words about him. "He's a peacock, Amara, all flash and feathers. He wants to be seen as a king, but he's forgotten that the king is the weakest piece on the board. He can only move one square at a time, and he's always one bad move away from being trapped." The world was buzzing about the dead billionaire's fortune. They were speculating about Wall Street titans, Ivy League universities, and international charities. No one was thinking about the silent woman from the courtroom. No one was thinking about the disgraced archivist packing her life into boxes. They were all looking at the loud, distracting moves on the board. No one was looking at the pawn that had quietly advanced all the way to the other side, just one move away from becoming a queen. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning. It wasn't delivered by the regular mailman, but by a prim, uniformed courier from a high-end service. He held a single, oversized envelope made of thick, black cardstock. Amara's name and address were written across the front in elegant, silver calligraphy. She signed for it and took the envelope inside. It felt heavy, substantial. Breaking the wax seal, a stylized B, she pulled out a single sheet of matching black card. The text was also in silver. You are hereby requested to attend the reading of the last will and testament of Mr. Silas Blackwood. It listed a date, a time, and an address. The Blackwood Foundation Building, an imposing granite structure in the heart of the financial district that had served as the silent, symbolic headquarters of Blackwood's empire for decades. The letter was signed by one Eleanor Vance, Esquires, executor of the Blackwood estate. Amara read the words and felt a quiet certainty settle over her. The next phase was beginning. She carefully placed the invitation on the mantelpiece, the only object left in the room besides her packed boxes. Miles away, in his glass-walled fortress in the sky, a second black envelope was delivered to Marcus Van Doren. His executive assistant brought it in on a silver tray, her expression one of reverence. "It's from the Blackwood estate, sir," she said breathlessly. Van Doren took it, a thrill running through him. He slit it open with a letter opener, his movements sharp and precise. He read the same words as Amara. Caleb Thorne, who was in the office discussing the company's stock bump following their recent media exposure, raised an eyebrow. "An invitation? I assume you're on the list." "Of course I am," Van Doren said, a triumphant gleam in his eye. Silas knew who was capable of carrying on his work. "This is it, Caleb. This is the coronation. He's likely leaving a significant portion of his Omnicorp shares to a trust managed by me, or perhaps endowing a new tech incubator with me as the chairman. This solidifies everything." "A brilliant move for the company," Thorne agreed, already calculating the financial implications. "We should prepare a statement. Your attendance will be a major news event." "We'll attend together," Van Doren decided. "It's important we present a united front. This is about legacy." He glanced at the invitation again. "I wonder who else will be there. A few old fossils, some charity leeches, no doubt." His mind briefly, dismissively, flickered to the woman from the trial. He imagined her packing up her pathetic apartment, her life in ruins. The thought brought him a deep, satisfying sense of order. The world was as it should be. The powerful rewarded, the weak punished. He tossed the invitation onto his desk. "Tell my tailor I need my charcoal pinstripe pressed. I want to look my best when I accept my inheritance." The day of the reading arrived, cloaked in a damp, grey overcast that seemed fitting for the occasion. The street outside the Blackwood Foundation was cordoned off, held back by a line of police. A swarm of media had gathered, their cameras and microphones aimed at the building's heavy bronze doors like a firing squad. Every arriving guest was scrutinized, their identity whispered and speculated upon. Van Doren and Thorne arrived in a black town car, stepping out into a flurry of camera flashes. Van Doren, looking solemn and powerful in his perfectly tailored suit, gave a slight nod to the press, a king acknowledging his subjects. They walked up the granite steps and were admitted into the hallowed silence of the building. The reading was to be held in the main boardroom, a cavernous space panelled with dark mahogany. A massive, polished table, long enough to seat 40, dominated the room. Around the perimeter, in discreet, separate chairs, sat the invited guests. Van Doren recognized a few faces, the heads of major banks, a stern-faced woman who ran a global philanthropy fund, a retired four-star general. He and Thorne took seats near the head of the table, their rightful place, they felt. They exchanged quiet, confident words, their eyes scanning the room, assessing the competition. And then Van Doren saw her. Tucked away in a simple chair in the far corner of the room, almost hidden by a potted ficus, was Amara Sterling. He froze, his brain struggling to process the image. She was wearing the same simple grey dress from the trial. She held no purse, no briefcase. She just sat there, hands folded in her lap, her posture perfect, her expression as calm and unreadable as ever. Van Doren nudged Thorne, hissing under his breath. What in God's name is she doing here? Thorne followed his gaze, and his jaw tightened in disbelief. A smirk quickly replaced his shock. "Well, I'll be," he whispered, a cruel amusement dancing in his eyes. The old man must have had a soft spot for strays. She's probably here for a pity bequest, a few $1,000s to help pay off the first fraction of a percent of what she owes us. How pathetic. The two men shared a low chuckle. Her presence wasn't a threat. It was a joke, a final, absurd chapter in her downfall. They watched as a few other guests noticed her, their expressions a mixture of confusion and disdain. The woman from the headlines, the convicted thief, sitting among them. The air around her grew cold as people subtly angled their chairs away. Amara seemed not to notice. Her gaze was fixed on the empty chair at the head of the table, the place where Silas would have sat. She was alone, ostracized, and seemingly oblivious. She was, once again, playing the part of the least significant person in the room, and it was working perfectly. At precisely 10 a.m., a tall, severe-looking woman with silver hair pulled into a tight chignon entered the room. She wore a tailored navy blue suit and carried a leather-bound portfolio. The murmuring in the room instantly ceased. This was Eleanor Vance, the legendary attorney who had been Silas Blackwood's sole counsel and confidant for over 40 years. She was as much of a phantom as her client had been, a name whispered with respect and fear in the highest legal circles. She walked to the head of the table and stood behind the main chair, placing the portfolio down and opening it. She didn't sit. She surveyed the room, her intelligent grey eyes missing nothing. Her gaze swept past Van Doren and Thorne, lingered for a fraction of a second on Amara, and then addressed the room as a whole. "Good morning," she said, her voice crisp and devoid of emotion. "I am Eleanor Vance. As the executor of Silas Blackwood's estate, I am here to read his final will and testament, as per his explicit instructions. There will be no questions until the reading is complete. All bequests are final and not subject to contestation. Mr. Blackwood was quite clear on that point." She put on a pair of reading glasses and looked down at the first page. "Let us begin." The first part of the will dealt with minor bequests. $10 million to the research hospital that had cared for him in his final years, a generous trust fund for his long-time household staff, a collection of priceless artwork donated to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. With each bequest, a palpable sense of relief and disappointment rippled through the guests who were named. Then came the corporate holdings. Various non-controlling shares in blue-chip companies were to be liquidated, with the funds directed to a new charitable foundation dedicated to providing scholarships for underprivileged students in STEM fields. Marcus Van Doren shifted in his seat, his confidence unwavering. These were just the appetizers. The main course, the controlling interest in his business empire, was yet to be served. Eleanor Vance paused and took a sip of water, letting the silence in the room deepen. "We now come to the primary assets of the estate," she continued, her tone unchanged. "This includes Mr. Blackwood's controlling interest in Blackwood Holdings International, which serves as the parent company for over 100 subsidiaries, his extensive real estate portfolio, and his personal investment fund, valued as of this morning at approximately $42 billion. A collective intake of breath swept the room. The numbers were even more staggering than the press had speculated. This was not just a fortune, it was a global economic force. Van Doren sat up straighter, his heart thumping in his chest. Thorne gave him a subtle, encouraging nod. This was their moment. "Mr. Blackwood gave very specific instructions regarding this portion of his estate," Eleanor said, her eyes lifting from the page to once again scan the faces before her. "He believed that such a legacy could be a great force for good or a terrible burden, depending on whose hands it fell into. He spent many years considering this decision. She paused again, the silence stretching to an almost unbearable length. He decided to leave it all, in its entirety, to a single individual. The room was frozen. A single air. The stakes had just been raised to an astronomical level. Who could it be? The banker? The general? Eleanor Vance's eyes moved past the powerful men at the table. They moved past the charity heads and the captains of industry. They moved to the corner of the room, to the woman in the simple grey dress who sat unnoticed by the ficus tree. "To my dearest friend," Eleanor read, her voice ringing with a sudden, clear authority. "My protégé, my queen in a world of pawns, and the only person who ever saw me for who I was and not what I had. I, Silas Blackwood, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath the entirety of my remaining fortune, my business empire, and my legacy, without condition, to Miss Amara Sterling." For a full 10 seconds, the only sound in the mahogany-panelled boardroom was the quiet hum of the building's ventilation system. The collective shock was so profound it was physically palpable. A thick, unbreathing silence. Then, chaos erupted. "What?" Marcus Van Doren shot to his feet, his chair scraping violently against the polished floor. "That's impossible! It's a joke!" Caleb Thorne was right behind him, his face a mask of incredulous fury. "This is an outrage! That woman is a convicted felon! She has a $50 million judgment against her! You can't give an empire to a common thief!" Others in the room began shouting, a cacophony of disbelief and anger. "Who is she?" "There must be a mistake." Eleanor Vance stood impassive amid the storm, waiting for it to subside. She held up a hand, and the sheer force of her personality gradually quieted the room. "As I stated," she said, her voice cutting through the remaining murmurs like a shard of ice, "the bequests are not subject to contestation. Mr. Blackwood's decision is final. And as for the judgment against Miss Sterling," she looked down at the will, "Mr. Blackwood anticipated this issue, which brings me to the codicil, which he titled A Final Lesson in Strategy." Her eyes found Van Doren and Thorne, and for the first time, a flicker of something cold and triumphant showed in her expression. "I will read directly from his text," she announced, "to Marcus Van Doren and the board of Omnicorp. For years I have watched you corrupt the company I helped build. I have watched you engage in systematic financial fraud, using offshore shell corporations to embezzle profits and manipulate stock prices. I knew it was only a matter of time before your greed outweighed your caution." Van Doren's face went white. Thorne's jaw hung open. Eleanor continued reading Silas's words. "So I decided to set a trap, a very simple one. I constructed a file containing irrefutable proof of your crimes, account numbers, transaction logs, encrypted correspondence. I disguised this file as sensitive R&D data for a project I knew you would consider priceless. Project Chimera. And I placed this file on a server in a subsidiary I knew you barely monitored, a company you considered insignificant." Her gaze flickered towards Amara. "Then, I asked the most trustworthy person I have ever known to access that file. I knew you monitored all network activity. I knew you would see the access and, in your arrogance, assume the most venal of motives. You would see a low-level archivist, and you would assume she was a thief." The pieces began to click into place in the minds of everyone in the room. The smug confidence on Thorne's face had evaporated, replaced by a dawning, sickening horror. The lawsuit was the final, beautiful piece of the trap, Eleanor read, her voice resonating with the dead man's vengeful satisfaction. by suing Amara Sterling for $50 million for the theft of that specific data. You, Marcus Van Doren, in a court of law, under oath, publicly authenticated the data's existence and affirmed its immense value to your corporation. You created a public record testifying to the importance of the very evidence that will now be your undoing. You handed the prosecution its entire case on a silver platter. Eleanor Vance looked up from the will. As per Mr. Blackwood's instructions, a package containing the data from Project Chimera, along with the key to its decryption and a certified copy of the court transcript from Omnicorp versus Sterling, was delivered to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney's Office at 9 a.m. this morning. A gasp went through the room. Van Doren staggered back, clutching the table for support. His empire, his reputation, his freedom, it was all dissolving in front of his eyes. Eleanor's final words were directed at the entire room, a pronouncement of the game's conclusion. Mr. Blackwood concludes with this: Amara's silence in court was not an admission of guilt. It was an act of supreme loyalty and strategic patience. She sacrificed her reputation to expose the truth. She allowed her queen to be taken to trap the king. Checkmate. The word hung in the air, electric and final. Checkmate. In the corner, Amara Sterling slowly, gracefully rose to her feet. The transformation was breathtaking. She was no longer the meek, invisible archivist. The quiet stillness that had been mistaken for fear was now revealed as immense, coiled power. The weight of $100 billion empire now rested on her shoulders, and it did not bow them. It straightened them into a posture of absolute authority. Her eyes, once unreadable, were now clear, sharp, and focused, and they were fixed on Marcus Van Doren. As if on cue, the grand mahogany doors at the back of the boardroom swung open. Two men in dark suits, their lapels bearing the unmistakable pins of federal agents, stepped inside. They were followed by several others who moved with quiet, professional efficiency to secure the exits. Panic erupted. Van Doren, his face ashen and slick with sweat, turned to Caleb Thorne. "Do something! This is slander, libel, a dead man's fantasy." But Thorne was a creature of self-preservation. He was already backing away, his mind racing, trying to calculate the distance between himself and his toxic, radioactive client. He saw no way out. The trap Silas had set was legally perfect. The public lawsuit was the key. It had created an undeniable chain of custody and relevance for the evidence. They had, in essence, prosecuted themselves. Amara began to walk forward, her steps measured and silent on the thick Persian rug. The other guests shrank back, parting for her as if she were royalty. She stopped directly in front of the two men who had destroyed her name just days before. She spoke, and her voice was not the soft whisper David Chen had heard. It was calm, level, and resonated with the chilling authority of her new position. "Mr. Van Doren," she began, "you sued me on behalf of Omnicorp for damages relating to the dissemination of its proprietary data." Van Doren could only stare at her, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. "As of the moment Miss Vance read my name, I became the sole beneficiary of the Blackwood estate," Amara continued. "This estate includes a 68% controlling interest in Omnicorp. Therefore, I am now your boss. And as the new majority shareholder and acting chairperson of the board, effective immediately, I am officially directing Omnicorp to drop its lawsuit against me. The judgment is void." She turned her cool gaze upon Caleb Thorne, who flinched as if struck. "Mr. Thorne, your firm's contract is with Omnicorp. As my first official act, I am terminating that contract. Your services are no longer required. You should have your office send a final bill to Mr. Van Doren personally. I'd advise you do it quickly, before his personal assets are frozen. Thorne paled, the implication clear. He would not be getting paid. He had hitched his wagon to a falling star, and now he was going down with it. The federal agents approached Van Doren. "Marcus Van Doren, you are under arrest for securities fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement." As they put his hands behind his back, Van Doren's eyes, wild with desperation, found Amara's. "You," he spat, his voice a venomous whisper. "You are nobody. A nothing." Amara looked at him, not with pity or with triumph, but with the dispassionate clarity of a grandmaster explaining a novice's mistake. "You were right about one thing, Mr. Van Doren," she said. "You saw a pawn and you underestimated her. You forgot that a pawn that makes it all the way to the other side of the board can become the most powerful piece of all." She held his gaze as they led him away, a broken man whose kingdom had crumbled in a matter of minutes. She had not raised her voice. She had not gloated. She had simply let her opponent's own aggression and arrogance become the instrument of his defeat. It was exactly as Silas had taught her. The long game was over, and she had won. With Marcus Van Doren's ignominious exit, the tension in the room broke, replaced by a frantic, sycophantic energy. The same people who had scorned Amara moments before were now clamoring for her attention. The bankers, the CEOs, the charity heads, they surged forward, their faces plastered with false smiles, hands outstretched. "Ms. Sterling, a masterstroke. An honor to meet you, an incredible mind. My firm would be delighted to offer its services." Amara held up a hand. The simple gesture silenced them all once more. She looked at the faces of the powerful, the greedy, and the opportunistic. They were the vultures Silas had warned her about. "Thank you for your attendance," she said, her voice carrying across the room. She turned to Eleanor Vance and gave her a slight, respectful nod. "Eleanor, if you would be so kind as to escort our guests out. We have a great deal of work to do." It was a dismissal, polite but absolute. Eleanor, with a thin, satisfied smile, began to herd the stunned titans out of the boardroom, leaving Amara alone in the cavernous space. She walked to the head of the table and finally sat in the chair that had belonged to Silas. She ran her hand along the polished wood, feeling the decades of history, power, and secrets contained within it. She was no longer just Amara. She was the heir to a legacy, the guardian of an empire. Her first call was to David Chen, her beleaguered public defender. He picked up on the first ring, his voice fraught with anxiety. "Amara, I've been trying to reach you. I saw the news. I can't believe. Is it true?" "It's true, David," she said warmly. "And I need a new personal attorney. Someone I can trust. The pay is considerably better than what the state was offering you. I'm sending a car." She hung up before he could finish stammering his acceptance. Her next hours were a blur of action. With Eleanor at her side, she began the immense task of taking control. She placed a call to the interim board of Omnicorp, informing them of the change in ownership and scheduling an emergency meeting. She instructed a team of forensic accountants, hand-picked by Eleanor years ago for this very day, to begin a full, transparent audit of every single Blackwood subsidiary, starting with Omnicorp. She was decisive, intelligent, and utterly in command. Every lesson Silas had taught her over the chessboard, patience, foresight, the ability to see the whole board, was now being applied to the world of global finance. She moved not with the reckless aggression of men like Van Doren, but with a quiet, deliberate precision that was far more formidable. Late that afternoon, she stood alone in Silas's old private office at the top of the foundation building. It had been left exactly as it was the day he retired. On a small table by the window sat a familiar object, an old, handcrafted wooden chess set. The pieces were set up mid-game. It was the last game she and Silas had ever played, left unfinished. She studied the board. Silas, playing white, was in a dominant position. But Amara, playing black, had a subtle, patient defense set up, with a path to victory that was difficult to see, but undeniable once you saw it. A small smile touched her lips. She picked up her black queen and moved it into its final position. "Checkmate, Silas," she whispered to the empty room. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the city skyline. From here, she could see the Omnicorp Tower, a monument to the greed and arrogance of its fallen king. It was part of her kingdom now. All of it was. Her reign was just beginning, and everyone, from Wall Street to Silicon Valley, was about to learn that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. The world outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of Silas Blackwood's office had become a glittering tapestry of night. The media storm, however, was just reaching hurricane force. On a muted television screen in the corner, Amara's face was beside the headline, "The Silent Heiress, from Courtroom Pariah to Corporate Queen." News anchors spoke in breathless tones about the day's events, calling it the most dramatic corporate succession in modern history. They dissected her silence, her simple dress, her mysterious connection to the reclusive billionaire. They didn't know the truth, but they loved the story. Amara paid it no mind. The past was a closed chapter. The future was on the massive mahogany desk in front of her. With Eleanor Vance standing by like a loyal general, Amara was beginning the monumental task of understanding her new kingdom. A gentle knock came at the door. "Ms. Sterling, Mr. Chen is here." "Send him in, thank you," Amara said. David Chen entered the office, and for a moment he simply stood there, looking utterly dwarfed by the scale of the room. His off-the-rack suit seemed even more out of place here than it had in the courtroom. He was clutching his worn briefcase as if it were a life raft. "Amara. Ms. Sterling," he stammered. "This is incredible. I saw the news. I still can't quite believe it." Amara offered him a warm, genuine smile. "Please, David. It's still Amara. You stood by me when you thought I had nothing. That is a debt I will not forget. Please have a seat." She gestured to a plush leather chair opposite her desk. He sank into it, looking dazed. "I don't understand," he said. "Why me? You could hire any lawyer in the world." "I don't want any lawyer in the world," Amara replied, her voice firm. "I want a lawyer who has integrity. I want someone who believes in helping people who can't help themselves. That's why your first task has nothing to do with corporate law." She pushed a folder across the desk. "That is the preliminary charter for the Sterling Foundation. Silas left money for scholarships, but I want to expand that. I want to create a new division dedicated to providing top-tier legal defense for individuals facing frivolous or malicious lawsuits from powerful corporations. People like I was supposed to be. I want you to run it, build it from the ground up." David stared at the folder, then back at her, his eyes wide with emotion. "You're serious?" "Completely. I can't think of anyone better qualified to ensure that what happened to me in that courtroom never happens to anyone else again." Before he could respond, the private line on the desk buzzed. Eleanor answered it, listened for a moment, and then looked at Amara. "It's Julian Croft, CIO of Titan Industries." Amara recognized the name immediately. Titan was Omnicorp's biggest rival. Croft and Van Doren were famously close, a pair of sharks who often hunted together. "Put him through," Amara said, her expression hardening slightly. "Julian," she said, her voice cool and even. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" A man's oily, overly friendly voice came through the speaker. "Amara. I hope I can call you Amara. A stunning, simply stunning turn of events today. I wanted to be the first to reach out and congratulate you. Marcus was always volatile. A shame what happened, but business is business. I have no doubt that with your fresh perspective, Omnicorp is in much better hands. Perhaps we could have dinner next week, discuss the future. Amara leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the speakerphone. Let me be clear, Mr. Croft. The time for friendly dinners with my predecessor's accomplices is over. I have read the files. All of them. I know about the price-fixing scheme you and Marcus arranged for the cobalt supply chain. So I will save you the cost of a dinner. Stay out of my way. Do not interfere with my company. And know that my legal team, unlike Marcus's, is very, very competent. Have a good evening. She pressed the button to end the call, cutting off his sputtering reply. The silence that followed was thick. David Chen looked at her with a new level of awe. Amara showed no sign of satisfaction. She simply turned her attention to a blank sheet of Blackwood Foundation letterhead. For several minutes she wrote, her pen moving with a steady, determined hand. When she was finished, she signed it, Amara Sterling, acting chairperson, and handed it to Eleanor. This is my first official directive to the board of Omnicorp, she said. Please have it messengered to every board member tonight. I want it on their desks in the morning. Eleanor read the memo. Her usually stoic expression broke into a rare, genuine smile. The directive was simple and revolutionary. 1. Executive compensation freeze. All executive-level bonuses and salary increases are frozen, pending the results of a full, independent forensic audit. 2. Wage review. An immediate, company-wide wage and benefits review is to be implemented. The review will start with the lowest-paid employees, the janitors, the mailroom clerks, the archivists, and will not conclude until every employee is earning a living wage. 3. End of forced arbitration. Effective immediately, all forced arbitration clauses in employee contracts are null and void. Omnicorp will no longer silence its workers' grievances. It was a declaration of war on the corporate culture Van Doren had built. It was the first move of a queen who remembered what it was like to be a pawn. As Eleanor and David left to carry out her orders, Amara walked to the window, looking down at the endless river of lights that was the city. Her victory today wasn't just about inheriting a fortune. It was about earning the right to change the rules of the game. The fight was far from over. 100 other Julian Crofts were out there, circling. But for the first time, Amara felt the full scope of her own power. The silence was over. It was time to speak. So ends the story of Amara Sterling, a woman who proved that true power isn't about shouting the loudest, but about seeing the furthest. Her silence in the face of accusation wasn't weakness. It was a weapon. She understood what her enemies did not, that in the great game of life, you don't always have to attack to win. Sometimes you just need to give your opponent enough rope to hang themselves. Amara's journey from a disgraced defendant to a billionaire heiress is a powerful reminder that integrity, patience, and hidden strength can overturn any board, no matter how badly the game seems to be going. The world had written her off as a pawn, but she emerged as the queen, ready to build a new legacy on the ashes of the old. If you were captivated by Amara's incredible story of strategy and justice, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a story of the underdog coming out on top, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another tale of karmic justice. Thank you for listening.